Welcome to our detailed explainer on the Age of Chaucer from English literature. We're jumping right into the messy, chaotic 14th century today to explore a foundational era marked by massive societal upheaval, emerging middle classes, and shifting gender dynamics. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Father of English poetry. 2. A world in upheaval. 3. The Three Estates. 4. Rise of the middle class. 5. Real medieval women. And 6. Satirizing society.
Section 1. Father of English Poetry, the Man and His Language.
Now, to really get Chaucer, you have to understand that he occupied this incredibly anomalous social position. He was a merchant's son who somehow became a royal courtier, which gave him a completely unique, inside-out view of English society. He literally lived right at the intersection of working tradesmen and high nobility. And if you want to know just how close he was to the crown, get this. During the 1359 Reims campaign in France, a young Chaucer was captured. King Edward III actually paid his ransom for £16. That's the equivalent of about $10,000 today. So yeah, he wasn't just some solitary writer locked in a room. He was a diplomat, a government official, and a total insider.
But here's the really fascinating part. Despite those deep royal ties, Chaucer wrote exclusively in Middle English. You have to remember, before him, if you wanted to write something important, you used Latin or French, the languages of power. But Middle English, that was the vernacular. It was the street language, this raw blend of Germanic, Anglo-Saxon, and French that emerged after the Norman conquest. By choosing it, Chaucer basically legitimized Middle English as a serious literary force.
And you can hear the absolute beauty of that blend in the opening lines of his masterpiece, The Canterbury Tales. When that April with his sure sote the drocht of March hath pursed to the root. Even though it looks a bit strange to our modern eyes, you can literally hear the rhythm of modern English being born right there. When April with its sweet-smelling showers has pierced the drought of March to the root.
Section 2. A World in Upheaval, the 14th Century Chaos. Okay, so to fully grasp his literature, we really need to set the scene. And honestly, the 14th century world Chaucer inhabited was an absolute mess. It was battered by unprecedented crises. In 1348, the Black Death struck and wiped out roughly half the population. Half! Then you had the Little Ice Age causing massive crop failures, and by 1381, all that pressure exploded into the massive social unrest of the Peasants' Revolt. Chaucer lived through all of it, passing away right at the end of the century in 1400. That plague-induced trauma created a huge labor shortage. Suddenly, the surviving peasants actually had bargaining power. When landlords tried to crack down and restrict their wages, well, people were furious. There was a popular 14th century rhyme that perfectly captures this newly egalitarian mood. When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? Basically, they were looking back to the Garden of Eden and asking, hey, when Adam was digging the earth and Eve was spinning cloth, where were the nobles? It was a direct, completely radical challenge to the established social order.
Section 3. The Three Estates, a fracturing system.
So what did that social order actually look like? Well, for centuries, the church had preached this very neat, idealized system called the Three Estates. Think of it as a perfect, divinely ordained triangle. You had the clergy, those who pray, the nobility, those who fight and protect, and the peasantry, those who work the land. Everyone supposedly had their place, and you definitely didn't step out of it.
But the demographic reality, it was incredibly unbalanced. The peasantry made up a staggering 80% of the European population. They were the foundation doing all the heavy lifting, supporting the lavish lifestyles, the stone castles, and the grand abbeys of that top 20%. And after the plague, that massive 80% was simply no longer willing to just quietly serve.
Section 4. Rise of the Middle Class, Wealth and Fashion.
Out of all this instability, a powerful new group emerged that completely broke the rules of those old three estates, a wealthy middle class of merchants and guildsmen. These were folks earning their status through trade, not inheriting it through noble blood. And you know how they showed off that new wealth? Fashion. It's so interesting, costume historians actually point to the mid-14th century as the birth of recognizable fashion. People moved away from those old simple draped garments with straight seams. Suddenly, we see complex tailoring, curved seams, lacing, and buttons. They were literally wearing their newly acquired wealth and rising status right there in the streets of London for everyone to see.
Section 5. Real Medieval Women, Autonomy and Agency.
Now, this newly mobile, economically active society also completely shifted the dynamic for women, often in ways that really surprise us today.
Officially, the church was still preaching absolute male control. They often framed women as inherently wicked and in need of submission. But the economic reality on the ground in London was a completely different story. Women had property rights. There was even a special legal category called femme sole that allowed women to operate as independent economic agents, running their own businesses completely autonomously from their husbands. They were a highly visible, incredibly active force in the city.
Section 6. Satirizing Society. The Canterbury Tales.
So, how exactly did Chaucer capture all this chaotic change? Well, he acted as a brilliant mirror to his society through his masterpiece, The Canterbury Tales. He used this genius framing device of a diverse group of pilgrims traveling together to a shrine. This setup gave him the perfect microcosm of English society. Through these pilgrims, he was able to impartially expose the hypocrisies of his age. He wasn't really taking political sides. He was just neutrally, yet very sharply, observing human nature.
And he didn't just give us a dry lecture about the changing estates. He used these incredibly specific, vivid characters as avatars to mock the moral failings of those institutions. For the corrupt clergy, you get characters like the pardoner and the hunting monk. The flawed nobility is represented by the knight, and that loud, ambitious new middle class, perfectly embodied by the merchant and the miller.
It's all about the irony with Chaucer. Take the pardoner. This guy gives these fiery, passionate sermons against greed, all while he's literally selling fake holy relics to line his own pockets. Or the noble knight, who is supposed to be the absolute pinnacle of chivalry. But the tale he tells reveals a brutal, self-serving reality hiding just beneath that romanticized chivalric ideal.
He also deeply reflected that female agency we were just talking about. Yes, you have famously assertive characters like the wife of Bath, who openly challenges male authority. But literature scholars have also pointed out something even more fascinating. He portrays seemingly submissive women, like Constance or Griselda, who practice what's called a non-passive submissiveness. They are subtly wielding actual agency and autonomy, surviving and maneuvering despite the severe patriarchal constraints of their world.
Chaucer didn't stop at individuals either. He took bold aim at the foundational institutions themselves. He tackled the harsh economic realities of medieval marriage and completely dismantled the unrealistic ideals of courtly love. He showed relationships that weren't about pure romantic idealism, but were instead filled with deception, power struggles, and manipulation.
But honestly, the greatest testament to his humor is that he actually wrote himself into his own book. In the tale of Sir Topus, Chaucer the author becomes Chaucer the pilgrim, and he portrays himself as this completely incompetent poet. His story is so long-winded, boring, and just flat-out terrible that the other pilgrims literally interrupt him and force him to stop talking. It is hilarious.
It's exactly that incredible blend of self-deprecating humor, gritty realism, and everyday vernacular that cemented Chaucer's legacy. When he died, he was entombed in Westminster Abbey. A century and a half later, the poet Edmund Spenser asked to be buried next to him, and that request accidentally started the famous Poets' Corner, where literary giants are still honored today.
So, what you should really take away from this explainer is that the 14th century's societal growing pains, the shifting wealth, the institutional corruption, the changing gender dynamics, they're all universally human. Chaucer just held up a mirror to it all. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to think about. If Chaucer were writing today, who would be the pilgrims on his modern journey, and which of our modern estates would he be satirizing?